Hello, today is Wednesday, March 13th, and welcome to episode 309 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Lester Munson. I'm joined today by NSI's founder and executive director, Jamil Jaffer, NSI's deputy director, Jessica Jones, and my fellow senior fellow, Morgan de la Vigna. Okay. We're going to talk about President Andrzej Duda of Poland, who visited Washington yesterday. For those of you in the D.C. area, there were huge impacts on traffic. So you probably noticed at least the impact of his visit. He did a number of visits. He met with President Biden. He met with congressional leaders. He did some media hits. He delivered a very important message about Congress voting to support Ukraine. He basically said, look, now is the time to meet the challenge from Russia. It is affordable. This is the best deal we're going to get. We need to invest now in stopping Russia, because if Russia gets Ukraine, it's going to continue its attacks on other European countries, possibly including Poland. Poland is very much on the front line of the situation here. Duda also delivered another message that I thought was fascinating, and he urged all NATO countries to dramatically increase their defense spending to over 3% of GDP. Right now, only Poland and the United States meet that threshold. It should be noted that only of the 32 NATO countries, only 11, so about a third, meet the 2% requirement. So what he's talking about is beyond what is even the agreed upon requirement, but it's an important message. President Duda knows, and I agree, that at the end of the day, the only thing that is really going to deter Russia is a robust defense posture from the West, while the immediate need is to support Ukraine. In the long run, the United States and other NATO countries are going to have to increase defense spending. This comes in the backdrop of a budget request from President Biden that actually is a net decrease in defense spending because of inflation and other things. The 1% increase is actually a decrease. So I'm not sure President Biden is getting the entire message from President Duda, and I wish he would. Morgan, I want to go to you. I know you've got, you want to kind of tie in some other issues here. What are your thoughts about the Duda visit?
Yes, so I really wanted to talk today about the ODNI annual report that was released on Monday, but there's a tie-in here. So I think bottom line, what the report indicated was that this deadlock that we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine right now really is playing to Russia's strategic military advantage. It's increasingly shifting the momentum in Moscow's favor. The longer this war goes on, the longer the lack of momentum that we're seeing from the United States and from Europe to contribute to Ukraine really is playing to Russia's advantage here. And bottom line, what we're seeing with whether it's President Macron from France coming out and saying that, he wants to send NATO troops to Ukraine to fight the Russians, or whether it's, Duda coming to the United States and pitching the White House and Capitol Hill on continued U.S. foreign assistance to Ukraine, and a 3%, of GDP goal here for defense spending. I think this is all part of their attempt to maintain momentum, which Ukraine will need to sustain itself throughout its conflict with Russia.
Jamil, I think President Duda might be a particularly good messenger for Trumpist Republicans. Trump had a pretty close relationship with Duda when he was president. Duda is a social conservative, such a social conservative, in fact, that Democrats were highly critical of him when he was elected as the president of Poland. He's been president of Poland for 9 years. He started during the Obama administration. Very interesting that Biden is using him as a messenger now. What are your thoughts about kind of these larger political dynamics?
Well, look, I mean, I think the problem is that while Duda may be a good Trump, ally whisperer, he's not a better Trump ally whisperer than Donald J. Trump himself, nor Viktor Orban, who, for some bizarre reason, Trump Republicans seem to think is the next coming of the Lord, even though he's ridiculous. And you might have just heard what Orban recently said, which was he said after visiting with Trump at Mar-a-Lago that in fact Mar-a-Lago that Trump would end the war in Ukraine, but he would do so by starving Ukraine of funds, which sounds about right and on brand. So, Trump will end the war in 24 hours, but he'll end the war in 24 hours by just handing Ukraine to Russia, which is totally unsurprising and would be right on point for Donald J. Trump.
What about Biden trying to use Duda as a messenger when it was his party who was so critical of Duda and his party in Poland for so long?
No, I got your point. I mean, I realize that look, Joe Biden's going to do what he thinks he needs to do to get this over the line. He's just not going to succeed because Duda is no Donald Trump.
I totally,
Jones,
yeah,
what are
I
your
agree
thoughts?
with both Morgan and Jamil. I mean, you see Duda trying to, dial up the pressure, build this momentum. He's kind of doing the press tour that we've talked about in the show we wish Joe Biden would do for American support in Ukraine. But unfortunately, he's not an American politician. He's not Donald Trump. He is a leader of a European country doing what Americans should be doing. It's a lot of the GOP is blocking aid. The GOP is the party of the people. That is not Duda. And their presumptive nominee is not speaking out for aid. In fact, to Jamil's point, I mean, you've got Orban and Mar-a-Lago saying, yeah, Trump said he's no aid. I mean, you can't really fight those words. And so I don't think Duda, as much as he wants to, is going to move congressional leaders. And we need President Biden doing his own, press tour. And the call out for 3%, it's a little too late, right? He should have seen, the European leaders should have seen the writing on the wall that Americans wanted Europe to step up when it comes to spending in defense. And it's like they're handing Donald Trump a win on that too. You can say, hey, I threatened them, and now they're finally ponying up, right? So it's a little too late.
Yeah,
Morgan,
jumping in here. I mean, I think 2 years into the war, and we see the momentum shift in Russia's favor. I mean, we're starting to sing our shoulda, coulda, wouldas here. And with that in mind, though, had the president articulated a strategy at the beginning of the war for how we would defeat Russia, how Ukraine would defeat Russia and restore its territorial integrity, and provided all of this assistance on the front end, this dithering, this delay in providing F-16s and stuff that would help Ukraine actually win here, that hasn't happened. If that had happened early on, we would have seen a complete game changer in Ukraine right now, and instead we're really seeing Russia sort of seize the advantage.
Morgan, Congress literally this week and next week is considering the defense budget for this year. They could plus that up. The president just submitted the request for fiscal year 25, which is next year. They can act on that. They can act on this supplemental appropriation. It's fine to blame President Biden for lack of vision and lack of energy and unwillingness to pursue all levers of power to pursue this thing. That's fine. And not inaccurate, but Congress is also an actor here. Why isn't they picking up the challenge here and meeting it?
Yeah, but Congress was with Ukraine at the beginning of this war. Everyone was united in favor of Ukraine crushing Russia and coming to Europe's defense here. That momentum has died. And so, I mean, I would argue that had we seized upon our congressional momentum and energy early on, I don't think we would have seen this sort of, this sort of trickle of support for Ukraine that we're seeing today. What we're seeing today in terms of like war fatigue, that was inevitable, but we could have had an impact earlier on.
Jamil, what are your thoughts? Is this President Biden's fault or Congress's fault or both?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, I think President Biden did not go in with the right strategy, as Morgan correctly laid out. He did not go with the plan to win. They're not winning as a result of that failure of imagination. At the same time, this war needs to be won. The idea that this war cannot continue to be fought and that we're going to leave Ukraine to the predations of the Russians is ridiculous. So Republicans need to get on with it. They need to put the money in, and if they think that we should be doing more, they should put more money in. Right, they should be investing more in our defense budget. The fact that the president is requesting a net cut in our defense budget at a time when there's a war in Ukraine, a war in the Middle East, our defense supplies have already been drawn down, right? And we're about to see a threat in Taiwan from China. This idea that we should be drawing down our defense budget and spending $1 trillion on God knows what, it's student loan aid and stuff that's clearly Joe Biden not planning for the future of America, but planning for the future of his reelection.
Jones, what do you think? Student loan relief or defense spending? What is more important?
Considering that student loan wasn't actually in the budget, that was just a wipe away. I agree that it's cutting defense spending right now doesn't seem, even on an optic level, even if it substantially didn't change anything, which it will, optic level is not the message you want to be sending to congressional leaders, to the American people, that we can draw down on defense spending when there's two wars going on, when we are talking about competition with China. So he's not, the president doesn't seem to be doing the kind of leadership messaging he needs to be doing. But to Jamil's point, Congress can step up if it wants to. If it wants to address these issues, it can do something about it.
A lot of blame to go around. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks so much to Devlin Burney, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their helping producing today's episode. Join us again on the Ides of March for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.